Sammy, good morning. How are you?
Can't complain, Jordy. How you been?
Doing good, man. LSU just wrapped up another weekend of camps. It seems like they've had thousands of prospects come through over the last couple of weekends. How could you recap the last 72 hours on campus for LSU? How did they use this elite camp to their advantage?
Hey, they've thrown out some new offers. They've got their first commitment of the 2024 class, and it's a national name. And obviously, you know, under every head coach, the summer is so critical, and now more than ever in 2022 when they have official visits now in June and July. And, you know, these official visits loom very large, especially for LSU, which is in search of a quarterback, which is in search of, you know, putting together their first full class under this whole staff together, getting a feel for this staff, the way they're going to recruit, the way they're going to evaluate. You know, they put out some big offers. They've offered Ashton Stamps at a Rummel. They had Lance Hurd on campus. They've offered some other critical guys in state, guys like Juwan Johnson from LCA, Wardell Mack from Arid, and this weekend getting guys like Lance Hurd and Cole Dellinger and all these 2024 and 2025 quarterbacks. You know, the drop-off hasn't been there. There's been plenty of elite quarterbacks from around the country getting in there, and I think obviously the biggest takeaway is, you know, they plucked a kid from Texas that was wanted by Alabama, that was wanted by Ohio State, and was about to visit A&M this week, and Maurice Williams Jr. from Shadow Creek, and he's a top 5 safety in the On3 consensus. It just goes to show you that, you know, for all the things that LSU has changed, some things stay pretty much the same.
Yeah. DBU, right? Who's heading up
Absolutely.
that recruitment? Who's leading that charge?
It's a whole combination. It's Kerry Cooks, Robert Steeples is involved, Brian Kelly is involved. You know, the way I've seen it is Brian Kelly is essentially the closer here. I think that was his MO at Notre Dame as well. And LSU has I think we've talked about it. They have a star-studded assistant staff. They have great coordinators that are very heavily involved in the recruiting. You know, Matt House and Denbrock on offense, and the support staff, guys like Sherman Wilson, Jordan Arseman, and those guys are they're Louisiana made. They understand where LSU stands in the big picture and the NIL era of recruiting, and they have a ton of quiet confidence in BK. And then BK is like I said, he's the closer here. And when BK gets to sit you down, so far the results have spoken for themselves.
Sam Spiegelman joining us here, Jordy Culotta Show. Make sure and follow him on Twitter at Sam Spiegs. Justin Jefferson was in town, and not the Justin Jefferson that was cutting up NFL defensive backs and LSU's leading wide receiver, the top junior college linebacker in the country, and it seems like LSU has made some waves there. What do you know about this recruitment?
Yeah, linebacker has been an interesting position for LSU with camp season coming. Jefferson, Damian Stanford from Katy Paytow earned an offer. He's been offered by Alabama and Texas recently. Jefferson was absolutely awesome working out on Thursday. Matt House worked him out personally. Him and Jonathan Bax at a car were probably the 2 top linebackers on that first day of camp. It seems like they also had this kid, never heard of him before, but watching him work out at a Pearl River community, Hosea Singleton. They had a couple of really talented linebackers out there. One commonality is they all seem to be kind of hybrid linebackers, kind of hybrid safety, hybrid linebacker, go in the front 7. I really like the Damian Stanford kid. I thought he was one of the best, and then Jefferson was not far behind him. They seems to be a critical position. You know, they got guys like Tackett Curtis and Jaden Osbury on the board. But it seems like they're trying to really hit linebacker hard, and summer was a major emphasis. Stanford and Jefferson are 2 definitely to watch with LSU at this position moving forward.
You mentioned Lance Hurd, who is the offensive lineman out of Neville. He played opposite Will Campbell last season, but is fastly becoming a high-rising recruit. Where does LSU stand with the offensive lineman out of Monroe?
Yeah, I think LSU is moving into a good spot. You know, earlier this month, he was still kind of trying to take an open approach to his recruitment. He made an OV to Nebraska to see our guy Mickey Joseph. He's got a former teammate, A.J. Allen, who's up there. So, you know, that's a visit to watch. Plus, you know, Nebraska right now is kicking in full swing with NIL money right now. It's very intriguing. He made his way to LSU. He worked out for Brad Davis, and he actually stayed throughout the weekends, which is a big situation for LSU. You know, obviously LSU even though they've been in contact with Lance for years, they officially put an offer on the table in the spring, and he really wanted to spend time with not only Coach Davis but to see BK up front and get a feel for this whole new staff, because obviously Coach O and Coach Davis again were recruiting him in the last staff, but he wanted to get a better feel for BK and this whole staff, and I think this weekend went a long way. He's got an official visit scheduled to Texas for this coming weekend. That, according to people that I know, that still kind of is up in the air. And that'll ultimately tell us a lot about where Lance feels, because a decision could come before his senior season at Neville, before they make a run for state. So if this official visit gets canceled, that might tell us some more. But I think LSU has kind of reasserted themselves as, if not the favorite, amongst the favorites now after this visit.
Sam, is he a bona fide tackle? Does he project?
No question.
Yeah.
Think about this. I know you've seen Will. Will is the best left tackle in the state since Cam Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
Will is going to be LSU's starting left tackle this year. Will was, Saturday ready toward, midway through his senior year, if not before it. He's just one of the more hardworking, built to play kids we've seen in the state at that premium position. And Lance is bigger. He's very coachable. He's extremely smart. He's a former defensive lineman that played right tackle last year and has transitioned to the left side this season. And if I send you the spring game clips, you're going to think he's a guy not going to play on Saturday, play on Sunday. He absolutely looks the part right now.
Wow. So he's bigger than Will?
He's about 6'7", 6'8", 300. On Friday, he put on a show during workouts and one-on-ones. He's light on his feet. He's blocking through guys and talking to the LSU staff. That was also at Lance's spring game. He's already looked better from the end of May to the end of June. So that says a lot about this kid.
Hearing really good things on the ground that Frank Wilson is making up on Caleb Jackson, the running back out of Baton Rouge right here at Liberty. What are you hearing the latest on him? I know he was at Texas A&M over the weekend.
Yeah, well, before he went to A&M on that OV, he did stop at LSU. He took an unofficial midweek visit. LSU has kind of shot to the top with Caleb. He was an early offer again for the last staff, and during this coaching transition sort of kind of fell behind. A&M, Tennessee, even Alabama got into the mix with Caleb, but I think midway through the spring, right after Frank put himself in a good spot with Trey Holly, who's obviously one of the nation's leading rushers at this point, he made a push for Caleb, and in my opinion, Caleb is the number one back in the state. He's Jonathan Taylor 2.0, track kid, built like a tank. Absolutely was dominant against STM in the playoffs last year, if not for a heroic effort from Walker Howard and that squad. But I like where LSU stands. I think they're officially the team to beat with Caleb. He might take some more time, but it looks like LSU is going to keep the two top backs in the state home, and that's a good start for Frank and LSU.
A prospect from Minnesota that'll be in town this weekend is Jackson Howard. It seems like Jamar Cain has really put LSU in a good spot. Where do you anticipate Howard to land?
Yeah, it's definitely something to watch, and with Jackson, I can't even tell you how many kids were from Minnesota, from Pickering, Ohio, from Illinois that made their way to LSU in the past couple of weeks. It just goes to show you, LSU is in a good spot with a lot of these kids like from the Midwest, like Jackson, that are visiting. It goes to show you that when Louisiana, when Texas, when Mississippi isn't loaded with high school guys, they can go outside of our little region here and go into the Midwest. And they're in a good spot with Jackson. They're in a good spot with a tight end that visited from the Midwest last weekend. Those have been two big observations of this new staff.
Jordan Matthews announced his 5 officials last week and left LSU out. He is a Baton Rouge cornerback that looks like he is, like you said, built for Saturdays with his long, rangy athletic ability. Where does LSU stand? Can LSU make up the ground that it seems like they are behind here?
Yeah, they're behind, but they're not out of it yet. There's still a long ways to go. At the beginning of the summer to now, things have already kind of shifted into a new gear. At the beginning of the summer, I have an early pick on Texas. Terry Joseph has been absolutely crushing it with Jordan for several years already. They built up a lead, but Tennessee was trying to get in the mix. Stanford has, uniqueness to that the opportunity to obviously play and also get that education, and it's very heavy on Jordan, who's a 4.0 student. the Alabama offer is definitely probably the biggest threat right now. Pete Golding was at his spring game. He loved Jordan. He's already worked out for Nick Saban. Obviously, you saw a similar trek. LSU was a little bit late to this party. His dad is a legacy. So I think LSU is just going to have to kind of work in overtime. The good news for LSU is, I think this is going to be Texas and Bama and possibly Stanford going into the next couple of months. I don't think he's in any rush to make a decision. So that gives LSU time to work the local angle. But they definitely are trailing now. But he is very high on their board, so I expect them to kind of shift into another gear for him.
Sammy, one prospect that it looks like LSU has made a tremendous jump on is Darren Reed, the 4-star defensive lineman out of the state of Georgia. His final 3 was announced over the weekend, and it includes Ohio State, Miami, and LSU. How do you feel about the Tigers landing the East Coast defensive end?
Like I said, they don't just recruit Louisiana. They don't just recruit Texas or the South. They have national reach. For a kid from the Peach State that doesn't have Georgia in there, you would look at it the same way. A kid from Baton Rouge that doesn't have LSU in his top group. That means he's heading out of state. And with that, LSU's gotten him on campus. They need defensive linemen. I mean, defensive line is going to be a strength for LSU this year, which is going to help in the recruiting. So I think they're in a good spot there. Miami is kind of picking up gear, and you never really rule out, Larry Johnson with a defensive lineman, especially one from Peach State. But I think LSU has kept afloat in that recruitment for an out-of-state kid, and he's one of the several defensive linemen that they're in a pretty good spot in right now.
Miami, Sammy, I know that they landed a big-time tight end. They're back, right? I mean, they feel like they're back.
Hey, I wouldn't bet against Coach Cristobal, and talking to people Coach O has been around there. Ed Reed has been around there. Like, if you think about it, like that program is one that's littered with potential, right? Like, if they have the right guy there, and it seems like Mario is a local guy, the great things can happen. But hell, if you have South Florida and the state of Florida as your recruiting base, you got all the kicks and giggles that come with the University of Miami. They got all new facilities. They got an energetic head coach that can recruit. They should be good, right?
Right. I mean, it feels like. I mean, they've got this huge infusion of NIL cash, right?
Well, that seems to be a
point of contention with the NCAA.
Yeah. They're supposed to have a ton of NIL cash. So TBD, I think a lot of schools around the country are being told one thing, and then getting that money is a whole different thing. But Miami, they're in the mix for a couple of these quarterbacks. They just got the tight end, like you mentioned. They got some big fish still in the pond, so I'm assuming they'll get their NIL straightened out before the big fish start coming off.
Last one, I'll get you out of here. Arch Manning just finished up a 3-week tour of official visits. He was in Athens 3 weeks ago. He was in Tuscaloosa last weekend, and he wrapped up in Austin this weekend. How do you anticipate this recruitment going? When do you expect a possible announcement on this now that he has pretty much all the information that he was seeking?
I always try to urge patience with Arch because he's never going to rush a decision. But I think after these 3 official visits to Alabama, Georgia, and Texas, I think, obviously Manning camp is coming up, and that's obviously a huge event for the family. They got all these major visits done. I think from here on out, they're home today. Over the next, couple of days, couple of weeks, until Newman is getting ready for the season, I think that the goal is to have a decision made. If Arch is not 100%, the decision will not come. I can assure you of that. I think people in his family have started to get an idea of where, they might be feeling, or what they would like, or maybe even what they think Arch likes. But from what I understand, Arch has not been ready. No team has been eliminated. Different schools point to different schools. The consensus sort of feels that it's, some people believe it's Georgia. Some people believe it's Texas. Depends on who you ask and at what point in the day and where he's just been. But I think the uniqueness of covering Arch is that, he rarely speaks. And when he does, he doesn't really give away too much. But, if you read between the lines, I do think that he is moving closer and closer to a decision. Whether after he's ready from these officials to make that decision, we do not know. But I think it could be done this summer. I think, if it was a picture-perfect situation where he can make that call, he will. But I was told, and as repeated last night, that this could go into the fall. That would not be surprising to anybody. But I think it's likely that he has this done before the end of the summer. I think that they're, just, complete exhaustion of the recruiting process and all that it entails. I think they'd like to have it done, but I can assure you nothing will be rushed, and once that decision is made, it'll be final, so they're just going to be careful about it.
Sam, have you ever covered a prospect like this? And in your all of your time covering recruiting, it feels like this has been one that has just been almost bizarre in a sense.
It is totally different, and it's exactly for what I said. It's just that, the lack of availability of that, of that number one player. I mean, we've covered Leonard, and we've covered Mason, and we've covered Derek Stingley, and they've all been number one overall guys. It's a very, Devontae Smith has been in that conversation. Devontae was like this too, but, Devontae was more accessible. It's Arches. You hear a lot of stuff from people close to him, but very rarely do you get to speak to Arch. And the craziest thing about this, and I say this all the time, so excuse me if I've already said this, Arch is a really cool kid. He's very level-headed. He is rarely rattled, much like he plays on the field. He takes us all in stride. Like, the amount of media attention and recruiting attention that this 17-year-old gets is out of this world. He handles it seamlessly. This is obviously a big decision for anyone, and that's why we see that 50% of kids either decommit or flip. At some point in their 2.5-2 year recruitment. And Arch is just trying to be careful and thorough. There's a ton of pressure on him to make the quote unquote right decision, which only he and his family knows. And I think they've handled it well. And it's a unique recruitment. I hope that there's a 30 for 30 or something on not only Arch, but really this whole quarterback class from the top with Arch on down. I mean, we got guys like Dante Moore and Nico, who's an $8 million man, and Eli flipped from A&M to Alabama, and Jimbo and Saban hate each other, and Ricky Collins is in the mix. Like, this is an interesting class. Like, give me a break.
It's Mean Girls.
It is. At Sam Spiegs is where you can follow him on Twitter. On3.com is where you read it. Whose campus you on to next?
We are on to the Nicholls State campus next for Manning Passing Academy.
Nice. Beautiful. Enjoy it, brother. We'll talk soon.
Absolutely, Jordy. Take care, bud.
All right, man. There he is.